What do you mean, denied?
Ma'am, step aside for additional screening.
This is ridiculous. I have a flight.
Ma'am.
Dr. Lillian Thornton rushed through O'Hare International Airport's Terminal 5, her roller bag gliding effortlessly behind her, a sharp contrast to the chaos around her. She was a woman of precision, order, and absolute control. At 42 years old, she had become the youngest general counsel in Transatlantic Air's 80-year history, a title she had to defend daily in boardrooms filled with gray-haired men who refused to take her seriously. Today was different. Today, everything depended on her. She wasn't just traveling to London for a business meeting. She was flying to handle the Henderson versus TAA arbitration that would determine whether the airline survived or was dismantled by a vulture fund. Tens of thousands of jobs rested on her legal expertise. The sterile air of the airport, weak coffee and anxiety, always made her despise this place. But she had learned to move through it with purpose, her mind already rehearsing arguments, anticipating counterattacks, visualizing victory. Subscribe to EchoStory for stories about powerful women fighting systemic injustice and winning. Like this video if you believe that justice requires courage and intelligence. She checked her watch, 4:15 p.m. Boarding began in 10 minutes. She was cutting it dangerously close. Lillian had spent the previous 3 hours in an emergency video conference with the TAA Board of Directors. The CEO, Philip Gregory, had been visibly anxious, his voice crackling through the video feed. Philip, she had assured him, her voice calm and measured, their entire case rests on a force majeure argument. They claim the 2024 fuel crisis was predictable. It's legally indefensible. I will make their lead counsel look like a first-year associate. Gregory had sighed with visible relief. Just get to London, Lillian. Get there and win. Those words echoed in her mind as she navigated the crowded concourse. She wore dark tailored trousers, a silk shell, and a simple blazer, her battle armor packed in her carry-on, ready for courtroom combat. Her hair was pulled back in a severe professional bun. She wore only a simple watch and the modest diamond studs she had bought herself when she passed the bar examination. Everything about her appearance communicated authority without decoration, power without pretense. She looked like a woman who had no time for nonsense, which was precisely accurate. Gate K-19 was absolute chaos when Lillian arrived. The flight was overbooked, and the restless energy of passengers who knew they would be crammed into a metal tube for 8 hours created visible tension. Families were arguing about seat changes. Business travelers were loudly complaining on their phones about missed connections. A disorganized line had formed near the boarding lanes, and at the center of this storm stood the gate agent. Brenda Jensen was a woman in her late 50s with a tight perm and a TAA name badge. She looked like she was one lost piece of luggage away from a complete breakdown. Her voice was nasal and sharp, cutting through the noise with aggressive commands. "Sir, your bag must fit in the sizer. I don't care if you flew with it last week. Mom, I cannot change your seat. The flight is full. You'll have to speak to the purser on board." Lillian found a quiet spot against a pillar and pulled up her tablet to review her opening statement one final time. She had learned long ago that preparation was everything. The words "confidential Henderson arbitration" glowed at the top of the screen. She tuned out the surrounding noise completely, her focus absolute and unbreakable. "We will now begin boarding TAA 808 to London Heathrow," Brenda announced, her voice strained and exhausted. "We will be boarding by zones. Please have your boarding pass and passport ready." Lillian watched as First Class and Zone 1 boarded. The line moved sluggishly. Then the announcement, "We now invite Zone 2 to board." Lillian packed away her tablet, zipped her bag, and joined the end of the Zone 2 line. She pulled up her digital boarding pass on her phone and felt a brief pang of exhaustion. It would be a long flight, followed by an even longer day of legal argument, but the thought of the fight ahead sharpened her senses. She was ready. She was always ready. The passenger in front of her, a nervous-looking student, was fumbling with his documents. Brenda snatched them, scanned them, and shoved them back with obvious disdain. "Go." Then it was Lillian's turn. Lillian stepped forward, holding her phone screen up to the scanner, her passport in her other hand. Beep, beep, beep. The scanner flashed red. A harsh negative sound echoed through the gate area. Brenda's eyes, already narrowed in irritation, shifted from the screen to Lillian with visible suspicion. "There's a problem with your ticket," Brenda said, her tone accusatory. "I'm sorry," Lillian replied, keeping her voice even and professional. "It should be fine. It was booked by corporate." "Well, corporate didn't pay for it, apparently," Brenda said loudly enough for the people behind Lillian to hear clearly. Everyone in the line could follow the conversation. She typed furiously into her terminal, her fingers stabbing at the keys with aggression. "This ticket is flagged. It says payment incomplete. You'll have to step aside." The words hung in the air like an accusation. Payment incomplete. Lillian felt a hot flush of anger, but she caged it, maintaining her composure. "That's impossible. Can you please run it again?" "My name is Lillian Thornton." Brenda's face twisted with disdain. "I don't care if your name is Santa Claus," Brenda snapped, her patience completely exhausted. "The system says you didn't pay. I have a full flight to board. Step aside now." She gestured sharply to a small sad area of carpet next to her podium, the side of security area where problem passengers were held. "Brenda," Lillian said, her voice dropping to the low, clear tone she used in depositions to signal serious authority. "I am not moving from this line until you tell me the specific issue. That ticket is valid. I am the general counsel for this airline, and I am on critical company business." It was a mistake to reveal her identity. Brenda's face contorted in disbelief, then shifted into sarcastic amusement. "Oh, are you? The general counsel?" "Sure, sweetheart. And I'm the Queen of England. You're trying to scam a free flight. I've seen it all before." She looked past Lillian, projecting her voice loudly enough for the entire gate area to hear. "I need security at gate K19. I have a passenger refusing to pay, claiming to work for the airline." A collective groan went up from the line. People stared at Lillian with mixtures of pity and annoyance. Her blood ran cold. This wasn't just an inconvenience. It was a public accusation. It was defamation. "Ma'am," Lillian said, her voice hardening to ice, "you are making a catastrophic error. I am warning you." "You're warning me?" Brenda laughed, a harsh sound that echoed through the gate area. "You're not getting on this plane." From the edge of the concourse, two airport police officers who had been lazily watching the crowd began to saunter over. One was young, Officer Diaz, looking bored and indifferent. The other was older, thicker, with a ruddy face and a clear air of self-importance. His badge read, Officer F. Miller. He had the bearing of someone who believed the world existed for him to dominate. "What's the problem here, Brenda?" Officer Miller asked, his thumbs hooked in his duty belt. He looked at Lillian, his eyes lingering for a moment and his expression soured with immediate disdain. "This woman," Brenda said, pointing a crimson-nailed finger at Lillian, "is trying to board with a fraudulent ticket. Now she's refusing to leave the line and causing a disturbance. She's getting aggressive." "Aggressive?" Lillian said, her voice rising in disbelief. "I have done nothing of the sort. I am simply trying to board my flight." Officer Miller stepped directly into her personal space. He was a good 6 inches taller, and he used every inch of it to loom menacingly. "Mom, you heard the gate agent. You're going to step aside or what?" Lillian demanded, her voice steady despite her racing heart. Officer Miller's face reddened with anger. He reached out and grabbed her arm, his grip painfully tight. Lillian gasped. His fingers dug into her skin like he was trying to leave bruises. He twisted her arm, forcing her to stumble forward. Without warning, he slammed her body hard against the jet bridge wall. The impact knocked the wind from her lungs. For a moment, everything went white with pain. She saw stars. She tasted blood in her mouth. The back of her head had struck the wall. Officer Diaz, Miller's partner, stepped forward immediately. "Frank, that's enough," he said. "We can handle this without—" "Stop," Miller snapped at his partner, his voice vicious and commanding. A young man in the crowd, Ben Carter, a software engineer waiting for his own flight, had begun recording the incident. On his phone the moment Officer Miller grabbed Lillian. He didn't stop. He captured every moment of the assault, the grab, the twist, the slam against the wall, Lillian's cry of pain, the complete lack of justification. Officer Diaz stepped back, clearly uncomfortable but unwilling to directly challenge his superior. "Officer." The crowd around them fell silent. Everyone could see what was happening. Everyone could see the injustice unfolding in real time. Lillian, her back against the wall, her arm still in Miller's grip, looked him directly in the eye. "I'm the general counsel of this airline," she said through gritted teeth. "I have a meeting with the CEO. You just assaulted me in front of 50 witnesses. Let me go." Officer Miller's grip loosened slightly. For a moment he seemed to process what she had said. Then, realizing he might have made a mistake but unwilling to back down, he released her arm and took a step back. "Fine. But you're not boarding this flight. You're coming with me for questioning." Before Lillian could respond, Philip Gregory himself emerged from the first-class lounge. The CEO of Transatlantic Air had been working in a quiet corner, reviewing documents when he heard the commotion. He stepped out just in time to see Officer Miller releasing Lillian's arm. Gregory's expression shifted from curiosity to absolute fury in a heartbeat. He approached them, his voice cold and commanding. "I'm Philip Gregory, CEO of Transatlantic Air. I just witnessed you assault my general counsel." Officer Miller's face went pale. "Mr. Gregory, I was just trying to—" "That woman," Gregory interrupted, pointing at Lillian, "is one of the most important executives at this company. And you just brutalized her for trying to board her own flight. I saw everything. Everyone here saw everything." Officer Miller stammered, trying to recover from his mistake. "Sir, I was just doing my job. Your job involves slamming passengers against walls." Gregory's voice dripped with contempt. "I'm filing a formal complaint with the Chicago Police Department right now, and I'm having my legal team contact the district attorney's office. Officer Diaz, did you witness this assault?" "Yes, sir," Officer Diaz said quietly. "I did." Lillian straightened her blazer, her arm throbbing with pain, but her voice remained steady. "I have to catch this flight, Mr. Gregory. There are 30,000 people counting on me to get to London." She boarded the aircraft, leaving Officer Miller standing at the gate, suddenly understanding the magnitude of what he had done. He had assaulted not just any passenger, but the general counsel of the airline, in front of the CEO, dozens of witnesses, and most critically, on video. As Lillian took her seat in first class, her arm was already swelling where Miller had grabbed it. She could see the purple bruising forming. The senior purser, Susan, approached with concern. "Dr. Thornton? Are you all right? Your arm?" "I'm fine." "Susan," Lillian said, though pain shot through her limb. "I need my laptop. I have work to do." As she worked during the flight, Lillian documented everything. She took photographs of the bruises. She noted the exact time and location of the assault. She already knew what she would do. She would not sue the city or the police department. She would sue Officer Frank Miller personally. She would pierce the veil of qualified immunity. She would make sure his life changed forever. Lillian arrived in London with her arm in significant pain and significant bruising visible. She checked into her hotel, briefly met with TAA's London legal team, and then rested. The next morning, she appeared before the arbitration panel for Henderson versus TAA. She was bruised, battered, but absolutely focused. She spent 8 hours dismantling Henderson's arguments. She exposed the logical fallacies in their force, Mazur claims. She demonstrated with meticulous detail how the 2024 fuel crisis had been predictable and therefore did not qualify for protection under the merger covenants. She referenced case law, contract language, and industry standards with the precision of a surgeon. She made Henderson's lead counsel look exactly like what she had promised, like a first-year associate. By the end of the day, the arbitration panel had ruled in TA's favor. Transatlantic Air would survive. The airline would remain whole. 30,000 jobs were saved. As Lillian walked out of the hearing room, she received a call from Philip Gregory. "Lillian," he said, his voice filled with relief and emotion. "You did it. You saved us. I'll see you when you return to Chicago." Lillian returned to Chicago, and immediately began building her case against Officer Frank Miller. She requested all video footage from the airport terminal. She filed Freedom of Information requests for Miller's personnel file, his disciplinary history, and his record of complaints. What she discovered was damning. Officer Frank Miller had been the subject of numerous complaints over his 15-year career. Passengers had reported him for aggressive behavior. Fellow officers had documented his use of excessive force. There was a pattern of behavior, a documented history of someone who believed his badge gave him unlimited authority. Lillian also discovered that Ben Carter's video had already begun circulating on social media. The hashtag O'Hare Assault was trending. News outlets were reporting on the incident. The pressure on the Chicago Police Department was mounting. She filed a complaint with the department's Internal Affairs Division. She filed a complaint with the Chicago Police Board. And then she filed civil charges against Officer Miller personally. Thornton versus Miller, not the city, not the department. Miller personally. For battery, emotional distress, and false imprisonment. She was piercing the veil of qualified immunity that usually protected police officers from personal liability. The Chicago Police Department initially tried to protect Officer Miller. The union filed grievances. Internal Affairs tried to downplay the incident. But the video evidence was undeniable. Ben Carter's recording showed every moment of the assault in crystal clear detail. There were 50 witnesses. The CEO of the Airline had testified. Officer Diaz had testified against his own partner. The narrative shifted rapidly. The mayor's office, under immense political pressure from Philip Gregory and the Board of Transatlantic Air, hung Officer Miller out to dry. The internal investigation was swift and thorough. The findings were devastating. Officer Miller had acted with excessive force. He had violated department policy. He had violated Lillian's civil rights. He was suspended without pay pending disciplinary proceedings. The union that had previously protected him began to distance itself from his case. Even his fellow officers, seeing the video, understood that this was not a defensible situation. The district attorney, responding to public pressure and clear evidence, charged Officer Frank Miller with assault and filing a false report. The trial was straightforward. The video evidence was undeniable. Officer Diaz testified that Miller had acted without justification. Philip Gregory testified that he had witnessed the entire assault. Ben Carter's video was entered as evidence. The jury deliberated for less than 3 hours before returning a guilty verdict on all counts. Officer Miller was convicted of assault causing bodily injury and filing a false police report. The judge, sentencing him, was clear about the severity of his actions. Officer Miller, you were entrusted with the authority of your badge. You abused that authority against a woman who posed no threat to anyone. You assaulted her for the crime of asserting her rights. You then filed a false report to cover up your actions. This court finds your behavior appalling. You are sentenced to 2 years in state prison. As criminal consequences unfolded, employment consequences followed. The Chicago Police Department formally terminated Officer Frank Miller for conduct unbecoming an officer, assault, and abuse of authority. But the cruelest blow came next. He lost his pension. Miller had been with the department for 15 years. He was just 2 years away from vesting, from securing a pension that would have sustained him for the rest of his life. Instead, because of his criminal conviction, the pension was forfeited. He had spent 15 years building toward a comfortable retirement, and now that retirement was gone. He would be starting over with nothing, no job, no pension, no future in law enforcement. The realization of what he had lost began to sink in only after the verdict. He had thrown away his entire career for a moment of uncontrolled violence for the satisfaction of dominating a woman who threatened his authority. Then came Lillian's civil suit, Thornton versus Miller. Miller had to hire a private lawyer to defend himself. He drained his savings paying legal fees. The case was straightforward. The video was undeniable. Lillian was seeking damages for medical expenses, emotional distress, lost wages from the missed meeting, and punitive damages. Facing a judgment that would bankrupt him for the rest of his life, Miller offered a settlement. But Lillian's terms were not about money, She demanded two specific things. First, Miller had to surrender his peace officer standards and training certification, meaning he could never be a cop in any state in America ever again. Not a police officer, not a security guard, not even a mall security guard. His career in law enforcement was permanently, irreversibly terminated. Second, he had to issue a formal written apology that would be read aloud in a public court hearing. In that apology, he had to admit that he had acted on personal bias, that his treatment of Lillian had been illegal, that his assault was unjustifiable. He had to confess his guilt to the entire world. Miller, his face beet red, his voice a broken mumble, read the apology in open court. With Judge Marshall presiding and the courtroom filled with journalists and observers, Officer Miller stood and read, "I assaulted Dr. Lillian Thornton without justification. My actions were based on personal bias, not on legitimate law enforcement duties. I abused the authority of my badge. I violated her civil rights. I caused her physical harm and emotional trauma. I take full responsibility for my actions. What I did was wrong. I was wrong." Lillian sat in the front row, her expression unreadable, as the man who had slammed her against a wall confessed his crime to the world. Frank Miller's power was completely gone. He had been stripped of his badge, his pension, his career, his reputation. He sold his house to pay his legal fees and was last seen working as a long-haul trucker, a solitary anonymous job where the only person he could bully was himself. Brenda Jensen, the gate agent who had initiated the entire incident, faced her own consequences. Lillian, working with Philip Gregory and the TAA Human Resources Department, had investigated Brenda's employment history. They discovered that over 7 years, Brenda had been the subject of 14 complaints from passengers. Passengers reported her for rudeness, discrimination, and accusatory behavior toward passengers of color. These complaints had been filed away and ignored. Brenda had never received any retraining. She had never faced discipline. The airline had essentially enabled her to continue her abusive behavior. But after Lillian's case became public, everything changed. TAA reviewed Brenda's file and found the pattern undeniable. Brenda was terminated for violating customer service standards, for engaging in discriminatory behavior, and for filing a false report against Dr. Thornton. She was also blacklisted within the airline industry. No other airline would hire her. She found herself working minimum wage jobs at shopping centers, a stark contrast to the power she had once wielded at the gate. Every passenger she had ever mistreated was now protected by systems she had helped expose. But Lillian knew that the truest justice had to include her own company. TAA was not innocent. Its systems had failed. Its management had ignored Brenda's 14 complaints. She went to Philip Gregory with a proposal. "We're going to get sued over this," she said. "Not by me, but by the next person, and the next, and the next. The 14 complaints against Brenda are a time bomb. We need to get ahead of this." "So what do?" Gregory asked. "We don't just fix it," Lillian said. "We lead. We transform the entire industry." 2 months later, TAA announced the Thornton Initiative. It was a complete top-to-bottom overhaul of TAA's customer service and security protocols. Part 1. Mandatory annual de-escalation and implicit bias training for every employee, from the CEO down to gate agents and baggage handlers. Failure to pass meant immediate termination. Part 2. A new streamlined passenger advocacy system. If a passenger filed a complaint against an employee, it was immediately flagged for human manager review, not filed away and forgotten. 3 similar complaints against one employee triggered automatic suspension and mandatory retraining. Part 3. A new protocol over prejudice rule. Any employee like Brenda who ignored verification protocols in favor of personal judgment would be immediately fired. No warnings. The Thornton Initiative was revolutionary, and other airlines initially mocked it. But then something unexpected happened. TAA's customer satisfaction scores, which had taken a significant hit after the incident, began to skyrocket. Customers felt safer. Employees felt supported when they did the right thing. The airline became known as the company that had fixed its problems, that had learned from its mistakes, that was committed to treating customers with dignity. Other airlines watched TAA's transformation and its financial success, and they began implementing similar programs. The Thornton Initiative became the gold standard for the entire industry. Airlines called Lillian asking for consultation. Universities asked her to speak about corporate accountability. Business schools used her case as a teaching example. Lillian had turned her humiliation into a corporate mandate that transformed an entire industry. Lillian was promoted to Executive Vice President and General Counsel of Transatlantic Air. She became one of the most powerful women in aviation. But more than that, she became a symbol of what was possible when someone with power chose to use it for justice. She received invitations to speak at international conferences. She published articles about corporate accountability and systemic change. She established the Thornton Foundation, dedicated to supporting victims of discrimination and training corporate leaders on implementing genuine diversity initiatives. Every major corporation that wanted to understand how to address systemic racism within their organization called Lillian. She had transformed her moment of victimization into a career dedicated to preventing others from experiencing similar victimization. 1 year later, Dr. Lillian Thornton walked toward Gate K9, now the renovated and renamed gate at O'Hare's Terminal 5. She was Executive Vice President and General Counsel, flying to London again, this time to finalize the acquisition of a smaller European airline, a deal made possible by TAA's new robust public image and healthy stock price. She was, as always, running on a tight schedule. She approached the podium. A new gate agent, a young man named Paul, looked up. His smile was genuine. "Good afternoon," he said. "Dr. Thornton, right?" Lillian paused, slightly surprised. "Yes, how did you know?" Paul tapped his screen. "We have a new system. It flags our executive-level employees. But it also, well, it flags you. The Thornton Initiative lady." He blushed. "Sorry, we all know the story. You're kind of a legend around here." "I'm just a passenger, Paul," Lillian said, smiling slightly. "Trying to get to London." "Well," Paul said, scanning her pass. "Beep. Green light. The system is working perfectly. Payment confirmed. You're all set. By the way, ma'am, I just wanted to say as a TAA employee, thank you." "Thank you for what?" "For making us better," he said simply. "It wasn't easy, that new training, but it's different now. We know what to do. We know how to handle things. And we know management has our back if we do the right thing." Lillian nodded, and the tightness in her chest that she had always felt when she was in this specific terminal finally eased. She walked onto the jet bridge, the very spot where she had been slammed against the wall. It was just a place now, a hallway. Its power over her was gone. She took her seat in 1A. Susan, the senior purser from that fateful flight, was working this one as well. "Dr. Thornton," Susan beamed. "Welcome aboard. Can I get you your usual?" "Water. No ice." "That would be lovely, Susan." "Thank you." As the plane pushed back, Lillian looked out the window at the hive of activity on the tarmac. She saw baggage handlers, fuel truck drivers, and wing walkers, all wearing the TAA uniform. They weren't just employees anymore. They were part of her initiative. They were, in a small way, her team. The company was safe. The bad actors were gone. The culture had changed. In the end, it wasn't the courtroom that defined Frank Miller's or Brenda Jensen's fate. It was a single airport terminal. It was the courage of one woman who refused to accept her humiliation silently. It was the decision to turn personal trauma into systemic transformation. Brenda, blacklisted from the airline industry, found herself in minimum wage jobs, a stark contrast to the power she once wielded. Officer Miller, stripped of his badge, pension, and pride, faced the humiliation of his public apology and a future he never anticipated. His authority was a hollow shell. And Dr. Lillian Thornton, she didn't just win her case, she reshaped an entire industry. Her Thornton Initiative became the gold standard for corporate accountability, proving that true power isn't in a badge or uniform, but in integrity, intelligence, and the courage to stand firm. The video served as a permanent reminder: a person's worth is never defined by a biased glance. Karma wasn't just swift, it was total.